Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Sarah Coleridge once wrote, "March brings breezes loud and shrill, stirs the dancing daffodil." And daffodils were much on our minds yesterday as we marked St. David's Day. You're most welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo, which brings you 2 hours of arts, culture, politics and current affairs. The world is still reeling from the noisy punch-up between Donald Trump and J.D. Vance in the US corner and Volodymyr Zelensky in the European. My panel will reflect on whether the world is changed forever or whether there's a way of reconciling the Oval Office competence. As the European political leaders discussed that very subject at a summit in London today, we believe that they should be thinking hard about how the conflict between Ukraine and Russia has changed the nature of war. Should it be out with the aircraft carriers and in with the drones? February was a busy month of classical music and opera. Sir Nicholas Kenyon will be here to enthuse about Mark Antony Tonage's opera Feston, which is just as shocking as the Thomas Vinterberg film of the same name. And theatre critic Stefan Kyriazis will be here to pass judgment on what he saw behind the curtain in London's West End during the last week. But first, your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom. Just coming up to 2 minutes past 10. Leading the news this hour, world leaders are gathering in London for a major summit on the war in Ukraine after a week of high-stakes diplomacy and fiery exchanges. It follows extraordinary scenes at the White House where Donald Trump clashed with Volodymyr Zelensky, telling him to strike a deal with Russia, or we are out, he said. Well, Dame Priti Patel spoke to us earlier here on GB News about the UK's relationship with the US. She says it remains firm, but condemned those scenes in Washington.
Those scenes on Friday in the White House were awful. They were absolutely awful. And, you know, I genuinely say this, when we look at President Zelensky, we feel a great deal of respect towards him because of the way in which he's conducted himself over the 3 years of this appalling illegal conflict and the barbarism of Russia, which he and his people, his country has stood up to. And that's why we will always stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and the people of Ukraine.
Well, Volodymyr Zelensky received a much warmer welcome in London on Saturday, with hopes that today's talks could forge a common position on ending the war in Ukraine. Sir Keir Starmer has been trying to smooth relations this week, speaking to both the US president and welcoming Zelensky to Downing Street in what was described as a warm meeting. Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch is calling on the Labour government to increase defence spending to 3% of national income by the end of this Parliament. Writing in The Telegraph, she says the Prime Minister's pledge to reach 2.5% by 2027 cannot be the final one. The Conservative leader argues the UK must lead by example and warns that failing to set out a plan would be tantamount to planning to fail. It follows the government's £2.2 billion loan to Ukraine. That is the largest since the war began, was announced alongside defence spending increases this week. Train fares are going up, and so is the pressure on commuters already battling record cancellations. From today, the cost of many journeys in England and in Wales is rising by around 4.6%, adding hundreds to the price of some season tickets. Campaigners warn it will pile further misery on hard-pressed households, with rail cards also becoming more expensive for the first time in over a decade. The Transport Secretary says she knows that passengers are frustrated, but insists the government's cap has kept the increase below average earnings growth. An update on the situation in the Middle East, and Israel has this morning blocked humanitarian aid into Gaza after the first phase of a ceasefire with Hamas expired. It follows the group rejecting a US proposal to extend the truce by 6 weeks in return for the release of hostages. The Israeli Prime Minister says there will now be further consequences unless the group changes its position. Hamas, though, has accused Israel of blackmail and called on mediators to intervene. Now, talks on a second phase of the deal, including more hostage releases, has barely begun. Pope Francis remains in a stable condition after suffering a breathing crisis over the weekend. He's battling double pneumonia and now in hospital for the 17th day. The Vatican says the 88-year-old had a peaceful night, though, and is receiving treatment to help him breathe. He was admitted to hospital on February the 14th with a severe respiratory infection that led to further complications. We're expecting a full medical update from the Vatican later today. And last night's Brits Awards went brat, apparently, as Charlie XCX dominated, scooping 5 trophies. Here's the moment she claimed one of those top honours.
Charlie XCX! I'm living proof that maybe it takes a long time, but you don't need to compromise. If you believe in yourself enough, and honestly, if you make good enough music, people will resonate with you and be right there with you.
Well, she won Song of the Year and Album of the Year. She was also named Songwriter of the Year and went on to win Best Dance Act. And Ezra Collective, Sam Fender and Stormzy were others big British winners of the night. So congratulations to them all. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in an hour. Now, though, it's over to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam Francis. By yesterday, people were asking each other, where were you when you saw and heard the terrible bust-up that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance had with Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office? That where were you question, maybe last asked on 9/11, suggests that this was a moment when the world changed. Has the United States, after years of combating communism and defending democracy, switched to supporting the former KGB officer Vladimir Putin in his claim to Ukrainian territory, seized with tremendous and lethal force? Do those of us who think that the world has become unrecognisably different exaggerate? Will it just blow over? Joining me now is my panel, former Conservative advisor Lauren McCavett, a journalist and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth, and political correspondent at The Spectator, James Heal. Welcome to all. Lauren in particular, welcome to this programme. Lauren, has the world changed unrecognisably?
I'm not sure it's a moment that changed the world. I think it's the culmination of a change that's been happening for quite a while. I think the way that the United States is voting, the people that it's choosing to put in office now, has been a trend that's been going for probably 10 years or so, that has culminated in Donald Trump and his 2 presidencies. The end result of which is this transition towards an America first, why should we bail you out? Why are we spending money on this mentality that reaches not just from, fairly minor aid expenditure issues in small aid projects somewhere in the Congo, but right the way up to the defence of Europe. The United States has been pivoting away from feeling that it needed to defend Europe for a while. The EU has been slow, the United Kingdom has been slow to recognise its need to upscale, given that the United States has been retreating. So I think that this was sort of the cherry on the cake, but the cake's been in the process for a while.
Yeah, so you're disputing whether it's a moment, but you're not disputing that the world has changed.
Absolutely, the world has changed.
Candice, what's your feeling?
Yes, I have many of the same thoughts. I mean, for me, I felt things were moving in a different direction internally in the US when Donald Trump named J.D. Vance as his vice president. And J.D. Vance is a very different flavour of Republican than we've gotten used to. He's quite against free trade. He was very supportive of Sarah Khan. She was the Attorney General, if I remember correctly. She brought a lot of the antitrust cases against some of the big American corporations. So he's quite protectionist in that sense. He's not a neocon in any way. He's very much America first. He's very sceptical about war. And what people are saying is he represents a younger generation of Republicans that's coming up. And they are also highly, highly sceptical of the Ukraine war as well. So I think when he named J.D. Vance as his vice president, I thought this is very symbolic. This is a big change. Things are moving in a very different direction. And I've noticed in the last few weeks, people have been talking about the post-war liberal order a lot. I think everyone's got this feeling now that that system is sort of breaking down a bit and something is coming along to replace it, but we don't know what yet.
James, you all heard very clearly from Donald Trump before he was elected president that he was going to end the war. But I think many of us are shocked by how one-sidedly he intends to end the war. Do you share that shock?
Yes, I do, and I think that it was clearly demonstrated there. There are so many people who purport to speak for Donald Trump. There are so many different figures in the administration, so many media outriders. What we saw there was the unvarnished spectacle, a 45-minute-long conversation, all playing out in public in glorious technicolor. And what was so striking to me was not just sort of how this moment was allowed to play out. And these so-called sprays, which is when you invite the cameras in to get a few moments and shots, normally take a few minutes or so. This was 45 minutes, but also the reaction to that, which is the White House was then amplifying all of it on social media. And that, for me, shows that they see a premium and a value in demonstrating to their voters that they're sort of able to sort of be strong compared to Ukraine. And that, I think, says something about how the American voters have shifted and the Republican coalition, which Donald Trump purports to speak to.
It's not a crime, of course, to speak to your own voters. And I dare say that Volodymyr Zelensky was speaking to his voters too. I mean, he has problems with public opinion at home. And a lot of people have been wondering why he didn't strike certain poses in the meeting, why he didn't come in saying thank you and why he didn't come in flattering. But I guess he has a home audience too. Having a home audience is not a crime.
Absolutely not. And I think what's very interesting is looking at Keir Starmer in the White House and Macron dealing with Trump. And there is a script that they sort of have to follow. There's an obligation to how we do diplomacy with the United States where, you just sort of have to sit there and Trump gives you basically a bit of a punishment beating some of the asides he's giving about the UK and about France. I think Zelensky has nothing left to lose. And I think, therefore, he can sit there and actually probably be a lot freer with Donald Trump and with J.D. Vance than many other world leaders could sitting on those seats. And I think that for his home audience in Ukraine is quite refreshing. I think that it's very refreshing for people in the United Kingdom who support Ukraine because it's something that most people, I believe, would recognise is not in the gift of our Prime Minister to do because, we can't just completely divorce ourselves from the Americans and say, fine, you're going to have a nutty for the next 3.5 years. We'll call you back when you've elected someone sensible again. We have to work with the United States day in, day out. I think Ukraine is in a slightly different position. It's got a lot of allies around the world. The United States is crucial for Ukrainian freedom, but if the price of dealing with Trump is giving away Ukraine, they're not going to settle for that.
For all viewers, we've got the door of Downing Street in view at the moment, and this is because Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, might emerge from that door. So far, only a cat has emerged from the door, but Giorgia Meloni might follow at some point. Candice, is there any way of putting the Oval Office combatants back together? What would it take?
I hope so, and I wonder if Britain can play a unique role in doing this. I mean, my first intuition the next day after sort of watching it and processing it was, OK, we can't all become disunited now. There has to be, I know everyone's given their support to Ukraine, but it's very important for the West to stay together and not to crack up. And I did think Keir Starmer wants to be a bridge, and he's kept his counsel so far in this. He hasn't really made any statements condemning Trump. Maybe also someone like Boris Johnson as well could play an unofficial role and sort of bring Trump and Zelensky together and help them heal this. I just wonder, though, if Zelensky is now in a bit of a weaker position with Trump and Trump can demand more from him.
Yeah, James, what do you make of Zelensky's position? I mean, if anything, his position with the European leaders seems to have been strengthened. I was on a programme on GBNews yesterday, and at least one Ukrainian member of parliament was thinking that his position at home was strengthened. I mean, there was a kind of feeling immediately in the aftermath of the debacle that maybe this was going to end his presidency. But he seems a little reinforced at the moment, if anything.
Well, I think, as you said, he has his own domestic audience. And remember, Zelensky is trying to bring his countrymen to the idea that for all their sacrifice over the last 3 years, there will have to be some kind of negotiation. He has his own political precariousness to consider in all of this. And you've got to think about Trump's own outcomes here, which is that for all the sense he wants to perhaps lord it over Zelensky, he doesn't actually want him to sort of walk away from this because he's promised a deal. He said he could get peace within 24 hours. So there is a mutual interest in having some kind of negotiation there. I just think that, as Candace says, the whole world has changed now. I think it was Hastings Ismay who said that there were 3 tenets to NATO: to keep the Americans in, the Russians out and the Germans down. All of those tenets are now being questioned. And I think we need to see, as Lauren says, the Trump isn't an aberration, it's a continuation. He left for 4 years and now he's come back. Voters want to move away from their role of world's policeman in America, and the Europeans now, today, need to step up.
Lauren, can you imagine Zelensky being required to, can you imagine him producing an apology to Donald Trump?
I can imagine him giving a statement where he says he wants to, emoliate the situation, make things a little bit better, but I can't imagine that statement including an apology, because I don't believe that Zelensky feels he did anything wrong, and I would agree with him. I think he was making some clear points to things that were being levelled at him by J.D. Vance and by Trump, and I think that's some of the things that they said have invoked a lot of anger in Europe, particularly around the "did you ever say thank you" statement. Well, there's an awful lot that the United States never said thank you to us for in relation to Iraq and Afghanistan. Thanking the Swedes, the Ukrainians who sent troops, this coalition of the willing that we had in the Middle East, because the United States, led the way there, because that was the response to 9/11 in many respects. Did they ever say thank you to us sufficiently? And when it comes to that, I don't think Zelensky should be apologising. I think he has to give a very diplomatic statement at some point in the next week, but I think he needs to do that with Europe standing squarely behind him. So he can't do that quite yet, because everybody needs to get their ducks in a row in Europe over the course of the next 48 hours, and then I think he'll probably say something.
Candice, is the British government taking a bit of a risk? We now know how very thin-skinned Donald Trump is. So that reception at Downing Street yesterday of Zelensky, which was very exceptional, the Prime Minister walked down the street to receive him. Now Zelensky is going to see the King. It had only been 48 hours, more or less, since Donald Trump had been invited, obviously for a different thing, a state visit. But is that rubbing salt in the Trumpian wounds?
This is one of the most tricky situations you can possibly navigate, trying to play well with both sides and be trusted with both sides. I think Keir Starmer is actually being quite canny. I think he's playing it quite well. From what we know, he had a number of phone calls to Trump, so presumably he's spoken with him about Zelensky coming. From what we know is Donald Trump really wants to have a state visit. He likes sort of being up there with royalty and being received with royalty, so he won't want to blow the relationship either. There's a lot of different things going on. I think you have to be kind of very psychologically attuned to everyone to be able to play this quite well. And let's see if we can pull it off. I hope we can.
James, do you think on that telephone conversation between Starmer and Zelensky, he said, oh, just one more thing, Donald, the King is going to invite Zelensky up to Sandringham. There's going to be quite a fuss made of him. Do you think that happened?
I think something like that, definitely. And obviously he pulled out the letter from it, and then Trump goes, do you want me to read it, etc. I mean, he loves the royals. That's one of the few cards we've got to play well, and he played it well there. And I do think...
No, so I'm asking, is it a misplay to get Zelensky to go and see His Majesty as well? Is that a misplay?
I don't think so, because I think what Trump can't stand is criticism of him, and actually what Starmer's doing is doing alternative gestures. So he's putting down the Twitter account, picking up the phones, and actually substituting, attacking Trump by saying, we're not pro... He's trying to be almost the Boris Johnson cakeist approach. We're pro-Zelensky and pro-Trump. And I think that is a sensible thing to do after the sort of failure of the past 10 years when Europeans just attack Trump and not actually do some proper gestures.
But while using it as an opportunity to get up Trump's nose, this will absolutely have gotten up Trump's nose, 100%. Like James says, he adores the royals. A second state visit for a president is unheard of. Now, in fairness, there hasn't been a point where there's been a president with two split presidencies with a new monarch in place at the point where the second presidency takes off. So there are some unprecedented terms here in relation to how that might work. But this really will have gotten up Trump's nose that he gets this massive state invite, and as soon as Zelensky just tips up in London and lands at Stansted, he gets to go straight up and see the King.
Badly dressed as well.
Well, exactly.
Well, anyone who suffers Stansted probably deserves a visit.
I agree. You know, I think everybody who suffers Stansted should have to go and see the King.
Candice, what prospect today of having a successful outcome to this summit? We all know, well, we pretty much know, I think, that they're going to pledge more money and they're going to talk about European solidarity amongst themselves and with Zelensky, and they're going to talk about finding a solution with Zelensky, but of course not with Putin, but some kind of formula that they can put back to Donald Trump. Since we kind of know that already, is there any way that today's meeting can be accounted a success?
I hope so. I think, look, I mean, everything that's gone on in the past 2 weeks, I think this meeting was sort of going to be a bit of a formality, but really now sort of Europe's had the electric shock treatment from America, and now we have to make real firm commitments to things like defence spending. So, yes, I think events have sort of taken everyone along, and now things have gotten really real, and there's no more platitudes now. Now things are really shifting, and shifting in a way I don't think any of us could have foreseen before.
Talking about home audiences, James, it feels like Keir Starmer's on a little bit of a roll at home. Certainly his visit to the White House got a very good press. And today he appears to be leading Europe, if only because he's chairing the meeting and it's in London. This is quite a good period for him.
It is, and I think that it shows he's spoken properly to Karen Pierce and then Peter Mandelson in the DC embassy. They've obviously learned a lot from the first Trump period in office, and I think that they're obviously trying to build up him as someone who can be a sensible, reliable international partner in quite unreliable times. Keir Starmer, barring any sort of political mishaps here, will be Prime Minister for the next 4 years. How many other world leaders can say the same? And Trump and Starmer's teams know they have to work together. So I think that by not criticising in public, taking a sort of step back seat, being able to pick up the phone to talk to everyone, Starmer's positioned himself quite well at a very uncertain and stable time.
Panel, thank you very much for the time being. We're going to move over to Downing Street. We've been looking at the front door for quite a long time, but we are now joined by GBNews political editor Christopher Hope. Christopher, can you hear me?
Hi, Michael. Morning from Downing Street, where Giorgia Meloni is just arriving now. She's the Italian Prime Minister, sweeping in here. I'm going to move out of the way so you can get this clip. 1 second now.
Thank you very much. So we're expecting to see, presumably, a motorcade arriving now. This is the arrival of Giorgia Meloni, Italian Prime Minister, into Downing Street. Giorgia Meloni was the only European leader who was invited to Donald Trump's inauguration. She did not have a private meeting with the president around the time of his inauguration, but she had been down to Mar-a-Lago on January the 5th. So she has seen President Trump relatively recently, although January the 5th now seems like an age ago. And she is very much a favoured European leader by Donald Trump. Italy's defence spending is nothing particularly to write home about. And there she is, Giorgia Meloni, emerging. Christopher, are you there?
Ms Meloni, do you want peace in Europe? How will you get peace in Europe, Ms Meloni?
Well, Giorgia Meloni...
How will you get peace in Europe?
I'm sure all leaders have been briefed to say nothing as they walk up Downing Street.
How can you get peace in Europe?
And Sir Keir Starmer kisses her on both cheeks.
Sir Keir, can you get a peace deal? Can you get a peace deal, Sir Keir?
Another warm welcome. Giorgia Meloni was something of a bogey woman on the left, so it's fascinating to see how the alliances shift. Kissed on both cheeks by Keir Starmer. And as usual, they find something very amusing in the distance. And they've been allowed into Downing Street.
OK.
Hello, Christopher.
Michael, there we have it. Giorgia Meloni arriving. I was shouting some questions to her. You may have picked them up on the feed there. Will there be a peace deal? Can they get a peace deal? We've heard from Sir Keir Starmer already this morning. He wants a coalition of the willing, UK and France, to coordinate that, bring some form of a peacekeeping force to the European Union. They do want to have some form of backstop from the US government, maybe radar or long jets. And they want to boost Ukraine. Well, that's happened already with the UK chucking over £2 million at Ukraine already from Rachel Reeves. That was agreed yesterday with Ukraine. So things are moving quite quickly here. Giorgia Meloni is behind me in Downing Street. The action moves this afternoon to Lancaster House. 16 world leaders mainly from Europe gathering there, with also those from Turkey, Canada, and the President of the European Commission and the European Council. The biggest peace deal peace conference of this note since the Second World War, because if there is fighting in Europe. We heard, didn't we, yesterday, or rather Friday evening, from what happened in the Oval Office. I was there on Thursday evening, a completely different feeling, one of goodwill from Donald Trump towards the UK and trying to get a peace deal following that minerals arrangement. That all fell apart spectacularly, as we know from watching GB News over the past few days on Friday night. Well, today the rebuild starts to try and bring the US back to the table, supported by a lot of European leaders.
Christopher Hope, thank you very much indeed. I'm glad your long wait in Downing Street was rewarded. And it's probably worth just noting that Giorgia Meloni probably has at least as good a relationship with Donald Trump as does Sir Keir Starmer. So maybe she can play a part in bridge building as well. Well, I interrupt my panel there, and I'm just going to say thank you, panel, for the time being. Lauren McKevitt, Candice Holsworth and James Neal. You'll be back shortly. You'll be back at noon to reassess last week's meeting at the White House. Zelensky spoke truth to power. Macron and Starmer flattered Trump. Is discretion the better part of valour? But coming up immediately, the European summit is set to start in London. Various nations are pledging to spend more on defence. But is what we spend the right measure? Has the conflict between Ukraine and Russia changed both the nature of war and the nature of the weapons needed to fight it? This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Well, it's an ice sculpture of an older man living in poverty, and it's been unveiled at the Tate Modern. But this is for an issue that I know basically all of our viewers and listeners, and ourselves included, really do care about.
Yeah, the activity was organised by the charity Independent Age, and it's to raise awareness of the dire financial struggles facing some older people.
Rob Trueheller is a 68-year-old pensioner who the ice sculpture depicts. Now, he's had his winter fuel payment cut off following Labour's tax raid.
Yes, and taxi driver Rob Trueheller joins us now alongside the head of policy and influencing at Independent Age, Morgan Vine. Welcome both. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Start with you, Rob. I mean, what does this sculpture mean to you then?
Well, it's there to... it's a focal point for people to look at and to understand that there's a lot of pensioners in poverty. You know, the winter fuel allowance, which was a mere spit in the ocean, really, £250 for each person, makes a heck of a difference when, you know, electricity prices, etc., are going up.
Talk to me about how this idea came about then and what Independent Age does.
So Independent Age is a national charity, and we provide free independent support to older people living on a low income. We try and make sure that they're getting all of the money they're entitled to. And we also use the evidence that comes through our services and through the grants that we give out to try and work out some of the systemic problems. And one of those is that older people just don't have enough money to live on. As Rob said, they're not receiving the money they're entitled to, many of them. But even for those people that are receiving that money, it's often not enough to live on. So we think that there's more that the UK government and companies and others can do to try and improve the situation.
Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. At today's London summit, European leaders will surely once more pledge to spend more in defence as they absorb that President Trump truly demands that Europe defend itself against Russia. My feeling is that committing a greater proportion of the economy to weaponry misses the point. The huge sums that we already spend on defence have left us virtually defenceless. Unless we spend better, we will remain sitting ducks. And the nature of war has been transformed by the 3 years of conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Do our leaders grasp what has changed? Joining me now is Russia correspondent at The Spectator magazine, Owen Matthews. Owen, welcome to GB News. And let me put that question to you. Do you think our leaders grasp how much the technology and the nature of warfare has changed?
Yes, I think the bottom line of all of this is everyone is forgetting that Zelensky commands 22 times more military personnel than Keir Starmer does. There's over a million Ukrainians under arms. The British Army in its entirety deployable is 56,000. That's including the guards at Buckingham Palace. I mean, it's actually extraordinary, the scale of the war that we are essentially preparing or about to underwrite. I don't think we don't have the financial or the military capacity to make any difference whatsoever, to be honest.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And talking a bit about the technology, on our screens we're looking at a tank at the moment. I would not want to be in a tank these days. Tanks seem so very vulnerable to drones. Tanks cost millions of pounds. Drones can cost hundreds or thousands of pounds. But tell me a bit about the change in the technology and the nature of warfare.
Well, the striking thing is that this is the Ukraine conflict is the first of modern times that has been fought without air superiority. And the entire philosophy of all Western militaries, especially the US military, was immediately establish massive air superiority. That was the case in all the Middle Eastern wars. And then once you have that, then you can dominate the battlefield and win it while actually being able to eliminate all enemy armor. In Ukraine, you have a completely different situation because neither aviation nor tanks, you know, the two sort of basic currencies of modern militaries have really been able to make a difference. And there was some hope for a while that there would be, you know, various sort of wonder weapons that we were going to give the Ukrainians that were going to make all the difference, whether it was sort of Challenger tanks and you know, German Leopards and so on. On the ground, those didn't make any difference. It was actually just brutal drone warfare, First World War style trench warfare, infantry attacks. It was almost as though the clock has been turned back a century on the battlefields of Donbass. Another thing that makes me very nervous is the British are very heavily invested in naval assets. I mean, for example, 2 aircraft carriers. The Ukrainians have demonstrated that marine drones can take out even very large ships. The Russian Navy has more or less been expelled from the Black Sea. Yes, that's absolutely the case. And the other major thing is that the major weapon of this war in terms of deep strikes has been rocketry. And that is the only real game changer that America could possibly provide. And it's only America. It's systems called THAAD, T-H-A-A-D, and it's actually the upgrade of Patriot that allows a sort of Israeli Iron Dome style, fully integrated sort of theater missile defense system. And it's one thing that the Ukrainians have not been given. And it's the one thing that actually on a practical level could provide a level of defense against a future Russian attack. But it's rocketry. It's those merciless, it's those absolutely, every night in Kiev you hear overhead, they call them mopeds, they're little 50 horsepower, 50cc Iranian Shahed drones overhead, and they're relentless, and the Ukrainians just can't shoot down enough of them to make themselves safe. So in practical terms, it's not really about planes, it's not about aircraft carriers, which are just mobile plane support systems, and it's not even about tanks, it's about actually protecting Ukraine cities from Putin's missiles. That's the only real game changer left in the repertoire.
Owen, thank you very much indeed. You've been focusing your remarks there very much on what we might be able to do for the Ukrainians. I'm also very much thinking about what we might need to do for our own defence, and I fear we wouldn't have air superiority, and of course we do not have an Iron Dome in place over Britain. Owen Matthews, thank you very much indeed. Coming up, Sir Nicholas Kenyon will join me to reflect on an exciting February for classical music and opera. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Could Doctor Who be for the chop after more than 60 years? Well, here to explain why there's a lot of rumour, a buzz about this story is the GB News entertainment editor, Alex Davies. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
What on earth is going on?
Well, this has all sort of come around because reports have emerged that the lead actor, Ncuti Gatwa, is planning on leaving. He's only been there for 2 years, but apparently he's already eyeing up the exit door. He wants to reportedly set up a new life in LA. He's got countless Hollywood opportunities lined up for him, according to reports. And the reports are also suggesting his team aren't too fond of some of the woke storylines that have emerged in the last few years. The series has come under fire a number of times. There's been several storylines that have been criticised for pushing certain narratives. They cast a black actor as Isaac Newton, for one. There are other examples, including misgendering aliens.
Do aliens have gender?
Well, you'd be surprised, apparently. There's one called a meep that David Tennant, who briefly reprised his role before Ncuti, he got the meep, their gender, wrong and was pulled up about it by a trans character.
Just very forced, it seems. Very forced. We need to get in the gender nouns and the pronouns. But there was also a bit of heat just for having a female doctor, wasn't there? Jodie Whittaker.
There was, but I feel like that's always going to get heat. When you take a fictional character, a fictional institution, which has been white men predominantly, and you put something that goes against that, you're going to get attention. This one in particular, like I say, with these sort of storylines, has garnered more attention than most.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Thomas Vinterberg's 1998 film Festen, which is Danish for The Celebration, was adapted for theatre by playwright David Eldridge and is now an opera composed by Mark Anthony Turnage. I saw it last night at the Royal Opera House Covent Garden on Thursday, when it received an enthusiastic response from an audience that had been shocked by a tale of depravity with a stream of four-letter obscenities, beautifully sung and perfectly enunciated. Here's a clip. Sir Nicholas Kenyon also saw Festen and indeed enjoyed a February full of classical music and opera, and I welcome him now. Let's talk about Festen first. I suppose we should still be cautious about spoiling it, a spoiler alert, but it touches on a very grim subject. It is deeply shocking, and in this adaptation, which is of course now in the English language, it is absolutely full of four-letter words, and people might find this hard to believe, but it is some combination of the most disturbing thing and a comedy. What a remarkable evening this was.
On every level, it was remarkable. The work is amazing, but it was so well done on every level, I thought. Singing, a production by Richard Jones, which absolutely matched the spirit of the piece. And I think you put your finger on something which really differentiates it from the film Festen that was the origin of the idea, which is that Mark Anthony Turnage has always had this slight strain of black humour in everything that he writes, even his most violent pieces. And what we see in Festen is something that isn't a black story all the way through. It has comic edges, it has one or two comic characters. I loved John Tomlinson as the grandfather in this family saga. So we know we are appearing at a 60th birthday party because the invitation is on our seats. And you're drawn into, you can also tell it's Danish, by the way, so you're drawn into this saga, which makes the revelation at the heart of it all the more gripping. And then the ramifications of the accusation that is made against Helge, the father of 4 children, one of whom has committed suicide, but 3 of whom are there present in their varying lively characters. But it's Alan Clayton, the tenor, as Christian, who really decides to go with the revelation and accuse his father. And the father, Gerald Finlay, a wonderfully impassive, oily character, is almost untouched by this.
And that is the final shock, isn't it? The impassivity of him and the fact that it doesn't seem to alter his position in his family, well, in his family perhaps, but not in society. So, alas, Festen has reached its last night, but I think it may come back. You've been pursuing a ring cycle, a Wagner ring cycle, in an unusual place.
Well, yes, the very plucky company, Regent's Opera, had previously mounted instalments of their ring cycle in the Freemasons' Hall in Covent Garden, a very striking venue. They couldn't use the Freemasons' Hall to complete the cycle this year, and so they moved to Bethnal Green, to a leisure centre which apparently is described as the spiritual home of British boxing, because that was where initial bouts took place. And it turned out to be a very satisfactory arena because a reduced orchestra used the stage of the hall, and the singers were right in the middle of 3 sides of audience. And so the impact, you know, Brunhilde was as near as we are to each other if you were sitting there at the front of that arena, and the impact was really tremendous.
That's absolutely fascinating, because of the many adjectives you might use of Goethe Dämmerung, intimate is perhaps not one of them, usually, but you had a rather intimate experience with the singers.
Yes, particularly the scenes, you know, Waltraute and Brunhilde, the ones where characters are coming up against each other. There was, unfortunately, and I only saw Goethe Dämmerung in this particular cycle, there was a lot of rather symbolist scenery and props and things, and people wielded fire extinguisher and a cactus, and there were some cans of beans lying around. But this didn't matter at all. The music was brilliantly reduced by conductor Ben Woodward, very, very well sounded, and it made a tremendous elemental impact, as Wagner should.
Fantastic. It's amazing, these people who are now doing these huge operas in smaller locations and on smaller budgets. Quite amazing. Thank you so much, Sir Nicholas Kenyon. Just briefly, Sir Keir Starmer has now sat down with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in Downing Street ahead of that European Leaders Summit later today. Let's take a quick listen in.
Well, George, you're very welcome, and it's fantastic to have you here for a really important bilateral meeting at a crucial time. My visit to Rome just a few months ago, in the autumn of last year, was a fantastic occasion to celebrate the closeness of our two nations, our joint issues of concern, whether that's the economy, migration, and of course defence and security. So I'm very much looking forward to having the opportunity today to talk to you about the important issues that face us. I think we approach them with a very similar mindset, and so I'm very much looking forward to hearing your views about these matters. So you're very welcome. Thank you for making time.
Thank you, Keir, for this invitation. Thank you for this occasion. I think it is particularly, precious in a moment, such the moment we are in. I think it is very, very important to talk each other, to coordinate. So thank you also for convening the summit we will have in the afternoon. We are all...
So Giorgia Meloni, who was once the bogey woman of the British left, in fact the international left, is welcomed to Downing Street, kissed on both cheeks by Sir Keir Starmer on the doorstep of Downing Street, and they're now sitting down. They're still risking having a conversation in front of the media. Didn't go too well last week in Washington, but we're not expecting any fireworks as they expose this conversation to the world's media. And good luck to them, because there's important work to be done. Now, coming up, Stefan Kyriazis will be here to review this week's treats from the West End and beyond. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast. Well, if you're heading towards Spain and the Canaries over the coming days, there will be some rain and potentially some strong winds around at times, but conditions will improve here as the week goes on. For parts of central Med, generally a fine start to the week here, maybe a few showers around, and for eastern areas, certainly temperatures are beginning to climb after a cold few days. And further west, actually, sunshine by the middle part of the week for Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, for most of us today, it's going to be largely dry. Best of the sunshine, however, will always be across more southern districts. So first thing this morning, plenty of sunshine across much of England and Wales, but a cold and frosty start here. More in the way of cloud further north. That cloud could potentially be thick enough in places to produce the odd spot of rain, with the main rain band just beginning to creep into the very far northwest of Scotland come the end of the afternoon. For most of us, temperatures very similar to what we saw on Saturday. At best, I think 10 to 11 degrees. But in the sunshine, I think it should feel pleasant enough for the time of year. So moving into Sunday evening, a fine end to the day for much of southern England and Wales. Hardly a cloud in the sky across some parts of the country. Further north, we are back into some cloud, and again, that cloud will be thick enough in places to produce the odd spot of rain, with the main rain band just beginning to spread into western Scotland come dusk. Rain will also be accompanied by a strengthening wind, so quite a wet and windy end to the day across many northwestern parts of the country. And then as we go through the course of the night, that rain band will gradually sink its way southwards. Initially heavy across some of the higher ground of Scotland, but as it approaches Northern Ireland and Northern England, it will begin to weaken by the end of the night. Ahead of it, though, largely clear across much of England and Wales, so another cold and frosty night to come here as we start Monday morning. But here we will see plenty of sunshine as we move into the first day of the new working week. Further north, more in the way of cloud, but that rain band is continuing to weaken as the day goes on. And then to the north of it, really, we're going to see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. Temperatures on Monday still continuing the average theme, around 10 to 11 degrees across the south, feeling a little bit cooler in the wind further north, with highs here around 9 degrees.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News. We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Theatre critic Stefan Kyriazis has spent another week stalking the stalls and has seen behind the curtain. Welcome to you. What have you seen?
Oh, we've got a lot to get through this week. I've seen 3 plays, a very, very mixed bag. First up is The Last Laugh. That's on at the Noel Coward Theatre at the moment, and then it is touring through till August. I really enjoyed it. We've got a little clip here to give you an idea and see if you can recognise who all these people are supposed to be, because if you don't, it doesn't work.
Bob Monkhouse. I'm sorry, I thought this was the comedian's dressing room.
He is joking, isn't he, Eric?
Of course he's joking. You are joking, aren't you, Tommy?
Yeah, of course I'm joking. I'm not.
No. That's good. That's very good.
Oh, hang on a minute, you got a pen.
It tells us there, actually, Eric Morecambe, Tommy Cooper and Bob Monkhouse being impersonated well.
By Bob Golding as Eric, Damien Williams as Tommy Cooper, and Simon Cartwright as Bob Monkhouse. They've all played the characters individually for many, many years. Then this is Paul Hendy, did a short film in 2017 where he imagined the three being together in a changing room. And then he's expanded it now to a play. I absolutely loved it. I mean, the Bob Monkhouse, the intonations in the voice are just quite incredible. But it's a little bit of a schlocky setup, and there's a big twist, which I saw coming a mile away. Gets a bit mawkish at the end. But the sheer joy, I don't know what other critics thought, but the sheer joy I saw in the audience around me, it is nostalgia, but it's also respect. It's also homage to their genius. So you get tons of their gags, tons of their shticks, but also lots of well-documented stuff that they said over their lives. So about things that they've gone through personally, family problems, health problems, and a really interesting back-and-forth discussion over what is comedy. Bob Monkhouse is very aware that he says funny things, the other two are funny, and that it's a question of respect and rankings. I thought it was clever, interesting, beautiful, moving. I loved it. I thoroughly, thoroughly recommend that one.
No, that's interesting, because I read a 2-star review, and it sounds like yours is, well, way up there, 4 or 5.
Curmudgeons.
Curmudgeons, right. Give me a second.
Well, so next up, we've got Backstroke. This is absolutely tantalising prospect. Celia Imrie, Tamsin Greig playing mother and daughter, Beth and Beau. I was absolutely thrilled about the thought of this, and it was dreadful. Dreadful, dreadful, dreadful. I walked in, there's a hospital bed there on stage and this big screen behind. And basically, the mother is suffering from dementia and various other failings. She'd been a very sort of hippy-dippy, careless mother. And Tamsin Greig, as the daughter, had a very difficult childhood where she was pretty much the carer, always anticipating when a problem would arise. And so she's become very careful and clenched with her own emotions, lots of resentment built up. She's also adopted a child that's got PTSD from abuse. You get these reportage-y video clips coming up. It's just all a little bit hammy. And I've been in hospital quite a lot recently, and I'm horrified by the depiction of, there's a very rude nurse and a very rude doctor, and I have never in my life experienced that. I think it's really, really cliched and lazy, and then an angel nurse that comes through.
Heavens, a little personal touch there.
Doesn't work, under-rehearsed. The two of them both had jitters. It didn't feel like it was lived in. Not good at all. That's on at the Donmar. And then finally, a little bit of prestige, classy theatre to sail us safely home. This is Brian Cox as Bach in a play called The Score. That's on at the Theatre Royal Haymarket. We've got a little clip here of Brian Cox just talking about it.
Ironically, I've played Bach before, and I didn't even know about him. Even from when I played him before, he was sort of complete enigma to me. But I've realized that he was a family man, and he was not in any way show-offy. He just did the work, and that's what his concern was, the work. And that's what pays off almost a century later with Mendelssohn, when Mendelssohn said, you know, this is the lost composer, and then his music was played more and more and more. Nobody knows very much about him. It's come through recordings and performances in the theatre, and that's what's interesting about it for me. You know, it's playing someone who was a lost hero.
Elegant, you'll see it's very traditional staging. They're in costume, period costume, correct costumes and sets and scenery. It's Bach when he got summoned to Frederick the Great's court, and it's a clash between ideals, religion, atheism, art, warfare. How can you create under a kind of warmongering leader? But also lots of interesting discussions about that. The key to it has been Ansari Cox, Nicole Ansari Cox, who is actually Brian Cox's wife. So that's got a little bit of buzz, and the two of them are gorgeous together, lots and lots of chemistry. So actually the family life is a little bit more interesting. It's a very solid, steady show, and I enjoyed it.
I'm so pleased you did. Thanks for all your reviews. Thank you, Stefan. That concludes the first hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo. Please rejoin me. The panel will look back at the meetings that President Macron and Keir Starmer had with Donald Trump. Were they afraid to speak truth to power, as Volodymyr Zelensky did in his meeting? Or is discretion the better part of valour? A new report from the Centre for Social Justice has revealed what it calls a striking reversal in the gender pay gap amid a crisis for boys in Britain. I'll talk to one of the report's authors. The Modern Cockney Festival will be worth a butcher's throughout March, and I'm going to be putting my finger into a couple of pies. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo on GB News.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So the tale of two halves that we've seen over the past couple of days are expected to continue as we head over the next couple of days. High pressure very much in charge over the southern half of the UK, but weather fronts trying to move in from the northwest, generally fizzling out once they bump into that area of high pressure. But there is a focus for some more clouds, so a much cloudier start to the day for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland this morning. However, the southern half of England, much of Wales, a bright but chilly start this morning with some frost in places. As we go through the rest of the afternoon, the cloud remains across much of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some outbreaks of patchy rain in places, but further south, plenty of sunshine and feeling pleasant where we do see that sunshine. Highs of 10, 11, perhaps 12 degrees in the south. As we then head into Sunday evening, we see this weather front arriving across the northwest, perhaps bringing some outbreaks of quite heavy rain across the Western Isles through Sunday evening, and generally remaining cloudy for much of the rest of Scotland, perhaps some outbreaks of patchy rain across northern England, southern Scotland this evening. A little drier, but still remaining quite cloudy across Northern Ireland. But for Wales and much of southern England, it will be a dry evening to come with plenty of clear spells to start the night. That weather front across the far northwest of Scotland continues to sink its way south and eastwards as we go through Sunday evening and into the start of Monday morning, perhaps bringing some heavy rainfall for a time, but generally fizzling out as the further south it reaches. For the southern half of the UK, plenty of clear spells, and that likely to lead to some chilly temperatures overnight, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in some rural spots, and likely to see some mist and fog, particularly across the southeast of England into the early hours of Monday morning too. So a chilly but bright start for most across much of England and Wales. Further north, still a cloudier start. Outbreaks of rain gradually fizzling out across northern parts of England, and perhaps a bit of hazy sunshine across parts of Wales and central England. But otherwise, plenty of sunshine across the very far south again, and temperatures around about average for the time of year.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. In Great Expectation, Charles Dickens wrote of a March day, the sun shines hot and the wind blows cold. It is summer in the light and winter in the shade. On this first Sunday in March, I welcome you to the second half of Sunday with Michael Portillo, offering you another hour of arts, culture, history, and food, glorious food. Today's ethical discussion will be on whether discretion is the better part of valour. Did the pasting given by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance to Volodymyr Zelensky for daring to speak up for truth and for his country make French President Macron and Sir Keir Starmer look weak for laying flattery on Trump with a trowel during their visits to the White House? Or was Zelensky simply being undiplomatic? My panel will opine. Are we failing Britain's lost boys? A new report from the Centre for Social Justice has revealed what they call a striking reversal in the gender pay gap amid a crisis for boys in Britain. I'll be joined by one of the report's authors. The Modern Cookery Festival, surely a feast for the mince pies, is underway throughout this month. One of the co-founders will join me. And as British Pie Week is set to start tomorrow, this crusty TV presenter will be filled in by restaurateur Karim Ullah. But before all of that, Sam Francis has your news headlines.
Michael, thank you very much, and good morning to you. In fact, good afternoon to you. It is 1 minute past midday. Well, a precious moment to secure peace. That's how Italy's Giorgia Meloni has described her meeting earlier with the Prime Minister at Downing Street. Both leaders say they are aligned on Ukraine, with Sir Keir Starmer calling their approach very similar. But Meloni's close ties to Donald Trump and absence from recent EU statements backing Volodymyr Zelensky have raised some questions. Well, our political editor Chris Hope is at Downing Street for us today ahead of a crucial summit with European leaders on the war in Ukraine.
Things are moving quite quickly here. Giorgia Meloni is behind me in Downing Street. The action moves this afternoon to Lancaster House. 16 world leaders mainly from Europe gathering there, with also those from Turkey, Canada, and the President of the European Commission and the European Council. The biggest peace conference of this note since the Second World War.
Well, the meeting at number 10 follows extraordinary scenes at the White House, where Donald Trump clashed with Zelensky, telling him to strike a deal with Russia or the US are out, he said. Dame Priti Patel, though, says the UK's relationship with the US remains firm, but she has condemned the scenes in Washington.
Those scenes on Friday in the White House were awful. They were absolutely awful. And, you know, I genuinely say this. When we look at President Zelensky, we feel a great deal of respect towards him because of the way in which he's conducted himself over the 3 years of this appalling illegal conflict and the barbarism of Russia, which he and his people, his country, has stood up to. And that's why we will always stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and the people of Ukraine.
In other news, train fares are going up, and so is the pressure on commuters already battling record cancellations. From today, the cost of many journeys in England and Wales is rising by around 4.6%, adding hundreds to the price of some season tickets. Campaigners warn it will just pile further misery on hard-pressed households, with rail cards also becoming more expensive for the first time in over a decade. Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander says she knows passengers are frustrated, but insists the government's cap has kept the increase below average earnings growth. Israel has blocked humanitarian aid into Gaza this morning after the first phase of a ceasefire with Hamas expired. It follows the group rejecting a US proposal to extend the truce by 6 weeks in return for the release of hostages. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there will be further consequences unless the terror group changes its position. Hamas, though, has accused Israel of blackmail and called on mediators to intervene. Talks on a second phase of the deal, including more hostage releases, have barely begun. Pope Francis remains in a stable condition after suffering a breathing crisis over the weekend as he battles double pneumonia. In hospital now for the 17th day. The Vatican says the 88-year-old had a peaceful night, though, and is receiving treatment to help him breathe. He was admitted to hospital on the 14th of February with a severe respiratory infection that led to further complications. We are expecting to hear a full medical update later today. And a private spacecraft has landed on the moon. This time, this one is still standing. Blue Ghost, built by Firefly Aerospace, is the first commercial lander to touch down in one piece after a rival mission toppled over last year. It's part of a new space race with private companies teaming up with NASA to unlock the moon's secrets. Experts say it could lead to cheaper missions and even help humans return to the lunar surface. No one, in fact, has walked on the moon since 1972, but that could, of course, all change very soon. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you for a look at the headlines in half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam Francis. Part of the outrage that I felt watching the debacle in the Oval Office was because President Zelensky has battled bravely for his country for 3 years, whilst the American president and vice president sounded just like loudmouths and badmouths. Macron and Starmer both received a good press for their Washington smarm offensives, heaping flattery on the thin-skinned President Trump. But does it now look as though they lacked the courage to tell it like it is? Perhaps hypocrisy is a vital ingredient in diplomacy. Is discretion the better part of valour? That's my question for my panel, which rejoins me. Former Conservative advisor Lauren McKevitt, journalist and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth, and political correspondent at The Spectator, James Heal. James, let me start with you. Is there any kind of reassessment now of the Starmer and Macron visits, which had such a splendid press at the time, but actually did not get what they most wanted, which was the American guarantee, the American backstop to Ukrainian security?
I think there is a degree of that, and people are saying, hang on a sec, what did we achieve from this? Clearly it was a good day for him, a good press, and a decent 24 hours for Keir Starmer and his team. But I think right now what we're doing is seeing how that's going to be in the context of this meeting today with the Europeans, because frankly the Americans aren't willing to give that backstop. So I think it's much too soon to judge the immediate assessment, particularly in Trump world, where we know things go up and down so quickly.
Candice, to the sort of general, if I may call it even the ethical point, should you go into a man like Trump and speak the truth? Should you? I mean, he is power. If ever there was an example of speaking truth to power, it is this one. Now, Starmer and Macron clearly didn't do that. Zelensky, well, he got halfway there. I mean, he hardly got a word out, poor fellow. But he was prepared. I mean, he was contradicting Trump. He was saying that some of his figures were not right. He was questioning, his false facts, false information. Which is the better?
So I have every sympathy with Zelensky. But you have to. The ends have to the ends justify the means, and I think ultimately you have to survive the moment. And I know that can be hard to take. And for someone like Zelensky, who is dealing with so much and has to have such a strong sense of self to survive an assault from someone like Putin. But if you have to do the best for what you need to do in the situation and secure what you need. I mean, you look at Golda Meir, for instance, during the Yom Kippur War, she had to deal with recalcitrant US leaders who were very sceptical, and she just had to appeal to their interests. I mean, obviously she was thinking about existential survival, but she had to appeal to them, and that's what she had to do, and she secured what she needed. So I just think you have to be like that. It's horrible. It's terrible. It's so hard to take. You could see Zelensky was struggling throughout. I mean, there were so many petty insults that he had to weather. And I felt very sorry for him, and I think everyone did, and everyone just saw that bullying, hectoring performance from Trump and Vance and felt disgusted. But afterwards, when I thought about it, I thought, no, you can't play it like that. The way that Macron did it and the way that Starmer did it, I think it's just the right way. It's the way you survive. That's all I can think is you have to survive.
Lauren, Candice may be right, but I find it rather depressing. Do you agree with Candice?
I don't, because I think that Zelensky was coming into the room very differently to how Starmer and Macron were. Zelensky is being asked to give away huge chunks of mineral rights from Ukraine in order for the United States to basically still be in the room with them. So when the Vice President says, well, you've never said thank you, are you supposed to say thank you as you turn over critical mineral assets to the United States in exchange for a peace agreement? I think the line on diplomacy has altered enormously over the course of the last century and has begun to be weighted significantly more in relation to commercial requirements from governments versus just anti-war requirements, so sort of just diplomacy trying to stop everybody going to war with each other. Because the wars have become so much more commercial in nature over the course of the last 100 years. And I think, when you are President Zelensky and you have effectively nothing else to give and nothing left to lose in a room like that. He's just come from a meeting room where he's been talking about how much he has to give away from his mineral rights, and he's coming into a room where he's being slated by the president and vice president for never saying thank you or for not recognising that Russia may have a claim of some description, which it does not. Wales has as much claim to Donetsk as Russia does. It was founded by a Welshman. So, I'd say we take it back for a Greater Wales, but I get overruled on that. When you're walking into a room like that, when there's almost nothing left to lose, the line on diplomacy, I think, is very different to the line on diplomacy between Starmer and Macron and Trump.
Yes, that's interesting. I wonder whether Zelensky doesn't have the imagination to realise how little imagination the Americans have. Let me explain what I mean. The Americans are so far from understanding what it's like for their nation to be under attack. Mainland America has never been under attack in the modern age. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, it went into the Second World War. When the Twin Towers were attacked in New York and the Pentagon, it went to war. And so I wonder if Zelensky just cannot understand that they don't know what it's like to be under constant missile attack for the last 3 years. And, you know, for someone to raise the question of what he was wearing when he's leading his nation through a war demonstrates that fundamental lack of imagination.
I agree, Michael. I think the point about empathy is demonstrated here in the UK by how the Americans indulged the IRA for many years. At the same time, ministers were begging them to actually take a very different view. They viewed it as an Irish War of Liberation, when, of course, it was very different in Northern Ireland, the situation that played out in the 70s and 80s and 90s. So I do think there is that sense, and, you know, there is that prevailing sense sometimes in America about sort of faraway countries of which we know nothing. Of course, as we know from history, wars that happen in Europe tend to end up one way or another in America's doorstep and backyard. So I do think there is that point about empathy. And, you know, also I think that Zelensky, of course, was speaking in his third language. He was trying to deal also with a different sort of culture, which is that he comes from the Ukrainian culture, where it's obviously difficult when he's dealing with sort of matters of blood and death, etc. We've seen many of his own countrymen die over the past 3 years. Yeah. So I do think there was that failure to empathise, and I have my every sympathy with him. The point, I suppose, is how do you play the cards best to your advantage? Now, sometimes in politics and diplomacy, that means making a grandstand. Other times it means sort of sucking it up, biting your tongue. And the key to challenge that is to know when to do both. And I wonder perhaps if playing it out in public like that was necessarily the best thing, given how much the Russian media, for instance, are jumping on this today, saying how great it was, and you've seen a divided West.
Well, Candice, then, let me come back to the previous point again, because we've just learnt there, or been reminded, how little empathy, how little imagination, how little understanding the American administration seems to have. So, Macron and Starmer go into the Oval Office and do nothing to educate the president, nothing to increase their understanding or their imagination. We leave it all to poor old Zelensky. Does that look good?
I think you're right. We are dealing with such an unprecedented situation. We are used to America being there for us and being united with us. And up until now, we've had Biden. He's always given his support to Ukraine. But it's been such a sharp shift. It's difficult to adjust, and I'm sure it's very difficult for Zelensky to adjust to that. I just wonder if Macron and Starmer think there's no way we're going to be able to shift them on this. This is what they think. They are, I think, in a bit of a disinformation bubble. I think Zelensky grasped that. I mean, all the questions that Trump was asking him throughout, Zelensky had to sort of push back a little bit, like, hang on a minute, like, it's very clear that you don't have a balanced picture here. Even when Vance said to him, well, I've seen online, he hasn't been to Ukraine, but he's seen online. They are very fixed in their views. It's clear that they've been very influenced by what they've seen on social media. It's very difficult to just shift them out of that in the course of one press conference.
But I also think there's a different role for different countries to play. Starmer's role in this is very different from Zelensky. British troops aren't dying in Ukraine. He's clearly trying to position himself as someone who can be an honest broker to all sides, who's going to be a sort of candid friend in private and talk on the phone rather than play the disputes out in public. That's very different to a war leader, to Zelensky. So they both have a different playbook to go from. The key thing is about sort of how does it appeal to each country's interests.
Lauren, is it defensible that the United States is stating publicly that Ukraine got itself into this war, is stating publicly that Zelensky is a dictator, is taking the side of Putin? Is it acceptable that our leaders have the opportunity to go to the White Office, the White House, the Oval Office, and they don't call out President Trump on these falsehoods?
Well, we don't obviously know what happens behind closed doors, and what we've just been talking about is that Starmer has played his public appearances with Trump very differently to Zelensky. But it's entirely possible that in private things have been a little different, that you know, the work that Peter Mandelson and Karen Pierce before him as our ambassadors in Washington have done with the team in the Trump White House may be very different. I think, you know, to return to Zelensky's attitude for a minute here, I think he's stunned, as I am, that, you know, yes, America hasn't been attacked really since Pearl Harbor by a nation state with an attempted, you know, invasion force, as it were, in many, many, many years. But the United States and the entire West have been under attack in a way that a lot of people in these countries don't understand, which is through cyber warfare, through troll farms, through Russia trying to undermine the social cohesion of the West by what they are putting onto the internet. And one of the things that the Trump White House has done is tell the National Security Agency in the United States to stop anti-Russia cyber interference. So they are descaling their ability to defend the United States against Russia. And I think Zelensky's probably sitting in this room saying, are you people, you know, what is going on here? In my third language, I'm still able to tell that you do not understand the threat that Russia poses to your country.
And putting your point together with Candace's point, which is that the president and the vice president getting their information online, you wonder how much of that online content has been influenced by Russia in the first place.
And to a certain degree by China.
But also you just see people like Elon Musk and other members of the administration just sharing uncritically things they've seen on X. And today, for instance, Musk has come out and said we should pull out of NATO, and you think you'd be very, you know, have to be very sceptical at some of the stuff online and how unsubstantiated it is.
Thank you very much, panel. Not very cheerful, that. Thank you very much, Laura McKevitt, Candace Holsworth and James Heal. Coming up, a new report from the Centre for Social Justice has revealed what they call a striking reversal in the gender pay gap amid a crisis for boys in Britain. I'll be discussing that next. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News. Thank you.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, joining us in the studio now is Chia Eaglin and Erin Cobb from Clark's Farm Greyhound Rescue, who have brought along two very special guests. This is Duchess.
So Duchess is the one I'm stroking. This is Duchess, isn't it? Our lady, joining us this morning. And then over there is Vieira.
Vieira's a chap, isn't he? And Duchess is a lady. So,
talk to us about their history. Now, they used to be racing dogs, didn't they? But now they're looking for a home.
Yeah, so both of these dogs were racing greyhounds. They have retired recently. So now we are getting them ready and prepared to go into a forever home, essentially.
So anyone watching, make sure you get on Clark's Farm website later on today, because these guys are up for adoption. And I mean,
and they are very cute.
How gorgeous.
Look how well behaved they are as well. They were a little bit excited when they came in because it's their first time on TV and they wanted to make a good impression.
They did.
Now
they're both looking, aren't they? They know what's up on
yawning already.
Here. Now, talk to us about greyhounds as a breed. If anyone was going to adopt a greyhound, what would they expect?
I'd say the first thing is couch potatoes. They are the most lazy dog ever.
Really? You wouldn't expect that because of the background.
Everyone has this massive misconception that they need loads of exercise, loads of walks, but they are actually, you know, quite happy with 2 20-minute walks a day. They are
really?
so like that.
Yeah.
Easy.
That's
as long as they're able to have their moments of madness, zoomies, you know, they do get the sillies, of course. But once they've had that, they are so happy to just chill out on the sofa with you. Usually,
they've all got different personalities, and it's just great to see. Even though some of them,
Duchess just perched on the back of the air.
Duchess is going to fall asleep. You're on TV, Duchess.
She's watching.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. A new report from the Centre for Social Justice has revealed a striking reversal in the gender pay gap amid a crisis for boys in Britain. The critical milestone was reached in 2022 when, for the first time, gross mean pay for women aged 16 to 24 in full-time work outstripped that of men in the same age group, a reversal that has persisted now for the past 2 years. The findings raise wider concerns about the education system, and the report explores the impact of fatherlessness and the lack of male role models. I'm joined by the Policy Director of the Centre for Social Justice, Edward Davis. Edward, very good to see you. This makes sad reading this report. What is happening to these boys? When does it start to happen to them?
Yeah, you're right. It does make sad reading. It's quite a compendium of statistics, this report, and it starts early. So from the very first day at school, boys are likely to be quite considerably behind. It's interesting, Keir Starmer's 75% school-ready target. He wants 75% of children to be ready for school on their first day. And the reality is 75% of girls are, but only 60% of boys are. So it starts early, and then after that, it's similar throughout schooling. Boys will do worse in their GCSEs. They will do worse at A-level. They will do worse in T-levels. They will be less likely to go to university and do worse at university and be less likely to then get in the job market. So it is quite a serious compendium of statistics.
This at a time when we thought that in England, I emphasise England, we've been doing rather better in schools. Our international scores in things like maths, arithmetic, English, these had been rising for some time. Yeah. So this decline in the performance of boys comes at a time when actually our education system was doing a little bit better.
So yeah, and a lot of that is being carried by girls. So girls are doing well in the education system, particularly compared to boys. And what you're seeing is this sort of distance between them is now growing. So when you get up to A-levels now, girls will likely do about 1.5 grades per A-level better than boys will do, meaning that their prospects in the job market will be much better. And I suppose coming back to that point on the pay gap, in some ways, the pay gap itself is not an issue. It's what the pay gap indicates. And what it indicates is that journey up into the world of work is going very badly for boys at the moment.
There's a stunning number of young men, young males, who are not in education, employment or training. What is that number? What is that proportion now?
So yes, it is about 500,000 now who are between 16 and 24 who are not in education, employment or training. It's about 1 in 7 young men compared to about 1 in 10 young women. So that's gone up quite steeply. And the proportion of those men has been going up for 20 or 30 years. And the reasons are complex as well. So the decline of traditional manufacturing jobs will certainly be part of that.
Yes.
But also we've just talked about the education statistics. And actually, if you're in a competitive market and you haven't got the qualifications, then you're less likely to get a job, which is why it sort of matters right the way down to that first day at primary school to ask what is going on with boys here.
Now, how do you make this connection with fatherlessness? Because presumably as many girls are fatherless as boys.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we have found is that there is this huge rise of fatherlessness in the UK, and it is quite hard to talk about as well. But the reality is, I'm in my mid-40s, hard though I'm sure it is to believe. In the mid-1970s, about 90% of 16-year-olds lived with their mum and dad, and it's now about 50-50. So there's been this huge change.
Huge.
And most of those lone parent households are mothers rather than fathers, so it tends to be the father that's absent. And you're right, that will affect boys and girls. But the difference for boys is it is that first role model in their life. It is what that looks like to be a man. And so we talk about things like Andrew Tate as being a real problem. Actually, Andrew Tate is a sort of symptom of the fact that a boy now is more likely to have a smartphone than a father at home. And so, each day as they go out to school, are they being told by their father, you are loved, you belong here, go out, win the day, work hard, or are they watching an Andrew Tate video? And what we're seeing is as that change has come during a boy's lifetime, more and more we're seeing the rise of this sort of feeling that there is something wrong because boys are not being fathered.
Is this the crusty view of my generation, looking down on this situation and saying this is caused by fatherlessness?
Yeah, so we were quite concerned about that. So we polled the general public, and then particularly we polled young men. And what we found fascinating was it is that group under 24 who are most concerned about fatherlessness. So about half the general public said, yes, this is a major problem. But in that young male group, it's about 2/3. And the reason, straightforwardly being, is they've seen it. It is part of their experience. They have grown up like that. Whereas, as I say, my generation, actually, most of us were lucky enough to grow up in fairly stable households. But that is not the case now.
Were you able to do any work, I think the answer is probably not, about the degree of fatherlessness? I mean, there will be many cases where the father is still in touch with the family. There'll be other cases where the father is not at all in touch. Yeah. Were you able to refine that?
So it's really hard to do. What we can say is that increasingly the father is not even present at birth, and actually we have the worst statistics in Europe for that. We are the most sort of fragile and complex families in Europe, and that's, again, is this sort of a crusty conservative view. That was a study actually done by the Institute for Fiscal Studies. It has a financial impact, it has an equality impact. It is a very real thing we're experiencing. So it is more serious. It is important to say that simply not living with your father is not some sort of death sentence. Like, plenty of children will do really well. This is not a judgment. But when you have this number of children not having regular contact with a father figure, it doesn't just affect your family, but actually you have whole communities where there are not male role models. And that's where you see things as well like gang crime coming in. You see boys being pulled into gangs because they can see charismatic male figures who will sort of give them hope in a way. And it's a sort of perverted hope, but it's a hope that they can be something, belong somewhere, make something of their life that they're maybe not seeing at home or their neighbour's home, or even at school where there are so few male teachers now.
Did your report look into ethnicity at all? We've seen in previous reports that Southeast Asian families, South Asian families, tend to do disproportionately well.
Yeah, so the report looks at boys in the whole, but what you do see is in different areas of life, different ethnicities do differently. So very famously in education, white working class boys do very badly. And that has been talked about quite a bit before. But as you say, particularly Chinese, Asian, Indian families, even children on free school meals tend to do better than the average. Again, though, when we look at what's going on in those families, they put a very high value on family structure, stability and education. Those things are very important in those communities. So in other areas of the report, we're looking at things like crime. So actually in crime, there's a disproportionate number of black boys in prison at the moment and in trouble with the police. So there are differences in ethnicities in different areas, but largely the problem we're looking at is around boys.
A sad problem, that's what we said at the beginning. Any solutions?
So, well, this is the first stage. We're going to be doing this over the next couple of years. What we wanted to do today was put out this massive statistics to say we've got a problem here. I think it's still a problem that people don't like to talk about, so we thought the first step has to be recognising we have one. And then over the next 2 years, we're going to be looking at a number of different areas, looking for solutions, looking at employment, fatherlessness, education, the criminal justice system, male suicide being a real problem at the moment, the biggest killer of men under 50 still. So we'll be looking at these things in periods over the next 2 years.
For example, I was stunned by the statistic about not in education, employment or training. I thought it was more or less compulsory for people to be one of those. What's changed there? How are these people slipping in such huge numbers through the net?
Yeah, I mean, one of the other stories that's coming out today actually is about changes to sickness benefit. And we're seeing a really large number of young men fall into long-term sickness. Young people and mental health is one of the drivers of increasing sickness benefit, and men within that are a really significant portion. But again, when you come back and look at some of the drivers of this, you will find some of the things, poor education, low family stability, things like that will be part of that problem.
It may give you some satisfaction. I see that your report has really got a lot of publicity. There's a lot of talk about it in the press. Congratulations on the work that you've done, even though it's highlighting a problem that we just wish were not there. Thank you very much indeed, Edward Davies. Well, coming up, the Modern Cockney Festival is underway throughout this month. One of the co-founders of the festival will join me to share what events they've got planned. But first, your latest news headlines from Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just coming up to 12:30. Italy's Prime Minister says Giorgia Meloni says the UK and Italy can play a key role in securing peace in Ukraine, calling it a precious moment to secure peace. She's been meeting with Sir Keir Starmer at Downing Street ahead of a key summit of European leaders later. Both say they're aligned on Ukraine, but Meloni's close ties to Donald Trump and absence from recent EU statements backing Volodymyr Zelensky have raised questions. Meloni says it's very, very important to avoid any split in the West. Earlier, our political editor Chris Hope was at Downing Street for us ahead of that critical summit with European leaders on the war in Ukraine.
Things are moving quite quickly here. Giorgia Meloni is behind me in Downing Street. The action moves this afternoon to Lancaster House. 16 world leaders mainly from Europe, gathering there, with also those from Turkey, Canada, and the President of the European Commission and the European Council. The biggest peace conference of this note since the Second World War.
Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch is calling on the Labour government to increase defence spending to 3% of national income by the end of this Parliament. Writing in The Telegraph, she says the Prime Minister's pledge to reach 2.5% by 2027 can't be the final one. The Conservative leader argues the UK must lead by example and warns that failing to set out a plan would be tantamount to planning to fail. It follows the government's £2.2 billion loan to Ukraine. That is the largest since the war began. That was announced alongside defence spending increases last week. Well, the pressure on commuters is set to rise as train fares are also set to go up. From today, the cost of many journeys in England and Wales is rising by around 4.6%, adding hundreds to the price of some season tickets. And campaigners warn it will just pile further misery on hard-pressed households, with rail cards also becoming more expensive for the first time in over a decade. The Transport Secretary says she knows passengers are frustrated, but insists the government's cap has kept the increase below average earnings growth. And last night's Brit Awards went brat, apparently, as Charlie XCX dominated, scooping up 5 trophies. Here's the moment she claimed one of the top honours.
Charlie XCX! I'm living proof that maybe it takes a long time, but you don't need to compromise. If you believe in yourself enough, and honestly, if you make good enough music, people will resonate with you and be right there with you.
Well, she won Song of the Year and Album of the Year, and she was also named Songwriter of the Year and went on to win Best Dance Act. Ezra Collective, Sam Fender and Stormzy were also among the other big British winners. Congratulations to them all. Well, those are the latest headlines for now. A full roundup at 1 o'clock, and Michael, also very brat, will be back with you after this.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Good morning. Are you all right?
I am all right. All the better for seeing you, my friend.
John, you've been through so much. We've just heard there about you losing your wife and losing your daughter. I'm so sorry to hear about both of those things. And despite all of that and everything you've been through, you continue to just give back. How can you do that? Just take something so negative and turn it into something so positive?
Well, Sheffield is the finest city in England. That's what I think about the Sheffield people and everybody. 250,000 I set out. I beat that. I got that. Just what's got in bucket. So I thought, well, set go ports a bit, are you? So we over 500. And we got that. And I thought, well, why not go say about 1 million? And we got 1 million. This is what I think about my people of Sheffield. It's just entitled my city. Sheffield, my city, that will always be home to me, no matter where I go or whatever sights I will see. Wherever I return, church bells will peal as I come home to the city of steel. A cathedral, cinemas, museums, Sheffield has such beautiful places. Home to a host of people of so many races, living and working in perfect harmony. That's why Sheffield is the greatest place to be. singing the praises of Sheffield, Sheffield, my Sheffield, as I go forth. For now we are the sporting city of the north. Wonderful people, so happy, so helpful, so kind. Sheffield, no better place you will find.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. A National Day of Dance is taking place today, organised by broadcaster Angela Rippon, who has brought together a variety of different community groups from several types of dance. Joining us now from central London is GB News reporter Sophie Reaper, who's joined by Angela Rippon and Strictly Come Dancing star Kay Widrington. Hello, Sophie, what's going on?
Good afternoon to you, Michael. Yes, we're here at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, where right now there's an Afrobeats carnival vibes class taking place. Now, today is all about a National Day of Dance. It's about people getting involved to benefit their physical and mental well-being. It's happening all over the UK, Blackpool, Birmingham, Dumfries, everywhere. Now, as I say, there's this class taking place right now, so I think we can nip in and we can take a look at what's going on. So as I say, it's all about people getting involved, no matter how old they are, no matter their level of physical fitness. It's all about just taking part. So I think we can now have two of these fabulous dancers to join us. So here we are. Joining us now are the fabulous Angela Rippon and her Strictly partner, Kai Widrington. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It looks it, although you still look fabulous no matter what. Talk to us about this National Day of Dance. Why is it so important that people just get out there and get on the dance floor?
Well, the main reason is because I think, you know, people want to get fit. They want to keep fit. They want to be fit from cradle to grave, basically, so that they can still, throughout their life, enjoy being fit and flexible, build core strength and balance, so that when we're in our old age, we can also be just as flexible as we were and just as fit as we used to be. And really, the message for Let's Dance is that I'm out of breath because we don't have to work out far. And I'm doing it in heels.
I was going to say, you're very impressive.
But the whole point is that people want to get fit. They tend to think perhaps about going to a gym or doing a park run. Brilliant, absolutely good, but that's not what fits everybody.
Yes.
Dance we love to watch as an entertainment, so it sort of sits under the radar, and you don't imagine or think about it as being an exercise. I can tell you, as you know, as Kai knows, being a professional, dance uses every part of your body and your brain, because you have to think about what you're doing, and it's social. And the great thing about it is you never see anybody dance without a smile on their face. It's a wonderful thing to do if you really want to be fit, and it doesn't matter what your age is. Today, on National Day of Dance, when we've got thousands of dance teachers, like our teacher here at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, taking a class and inviting people in and saying, come and see what we're doing. It's an opportunity and a National Day of Dance. I'm amazed that the nation isn't rocking at the moment, actually, because there are thousands of people dancing today, literally all over the country, from the Channel Islands in the far west to the Orkney Isles in the far north, Ireland, Wales, Scotland, throughout England. It is a great way to get fit, and that's what the whole point is. So if you want to get fit and you want to have fun at the same time, go to a dance class.
Now, Kai, you're a dancer by trade. This is what you do on a day-to-day. If you had a message for people at home who are a bit nervous, a bit, awkward about these kind of things, what would your message to them be?
Go out and do it. Go out and do it. Look what we've got here. I mean, just go and give it a go. You've got to start somewhere. I mean, for me, I was a youngster. I started at 7 years old. But it's never too late. I know people that I work with now that didn't start dancing until they were sort of 17, 18, 19, and they're professional dancers. And the whole beauty about this is we're not trying to be professional dancers. We're trying to just get fit and have fun. And as Angela said, it's good for your brain, it's good for your body, it's good for your soul, it's good for your social. There's kind of no negatives, really. It is all positive, so that's kind of why you should do it.
We were at the Royal Academy of Dance earlier, where they were doing a class. They're doing classes all day there for various things, and they were doing a family day. So the youngest dancer, I think, was 2.5, and it was for mum and dads to come with their littlies. 5, I think, was the oldest. But the oldest person we've got dancing today is a lady up in Harrogate. She's 95, and we've got everything in between.
Well, we'll let you two get back to your Afrobeats vibe carnival dance session. We'll be following you for the rest of the day, won't we? So we'll see you perhaps a little bit later on.
And is Michael still on air?
Michael is on air right now.
Hi, Michael. You do know when I'm next in GB News, I'm going to get you moving, don't you?
Oh, my goodness, what a threat.
Thank you both so much.
Hello,
there
Angela. Great to see you. Thank you very much, Sophie, too. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Kai. Wow, the idea of me dancing. Frightening. Now, this month celebrates the Modern Cockney Festival, described as a celebration of grassroots community partnership between different cultures and heritages. So, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Saif Osmani. Well, thank you for making your way down the Apple and Pears to our basement studio. But what do you mean by modern Cockney?
We believe that Cockney has evolved. It's changing constantly because language constantly changes. You know, this idea that language is just contained within dictionaries is actually a false idea. Language is constantly changing, adapting to its context, and Cockney being predominantly the eastward identity of London, it has evolved and has changed, and Cockney itself comes in multiple forms now. And so we've come up with a modern Cockney festival so that we move away from the nostalgia territory and the black and white photographs, and we look at it for what it is today.
OK, and what is it today? I mean, illustrate that by some of the things that you're going to be doing and experiencing.
So just yesterday, we were at the London Museum Docklands. We were there with the Pearly King of Woolwich, Clive Bennett, and he was talking to people about Cockney rhyming slang. He was talking to new generations, people from abroad, talking about why it's important that we've still got this oral language, call it a socialect, a sort of dialect or anything like that. You can call it what you want. Some people call it an accent. But actually, ultimately, it's a language and it's an identity of London and Londoners, and it's an important one, which a lot of people identify with across different cultures. So we wanted to celebrate that through the programme that we put together, which is the Modern Cockney Festival.
And tell me some of the things. Food is going to play a part in it, presumably. What kind of foods are you offering?
So the traditional one, which is pie and mash, which everyone recognises, is actually, we've got a petition running at the moment. So pie and mash has seen a slight decline in its traditional areas of East London, but you'll see a big upsurge in Essex and Bishop Stortford. And so if you go by the geographic indicators, you can see what's happened. A lot of traditional embedded Cockney communities have started moving out in different forms, but a lot of them still remain as well. So the pie and mash shops are there, so we want pie and mash recognised with regional status.
And what about Bengali food?
Bengali food is very much the Ruby Murray curry is there, part of Brick Lane. So Brick Lane is obviously an important centre for curry, especially the British curry, actually. I mean, I think there's a time where, and today's probably the time that the British can claim the curry house for themselves. But the Bangladeshis and the different migrants have really made Cockney what it is as well, and the area what it is. Whether you're talking about the Jewish, the Huguenots, the Bengalis, the Somalis, you know, there's a real diversity there, and we really want to celebrate that through the programme that we've put together.
I hope you have a wonderful festival. Thank you very much for coming in on Sunday to our studio here. That was Saif Osmani. Briefly, Sir Keir Starmer has now arrived at that summit of European leaders and is now waiting for his fellow leaders to join him. Who have we? President Macron there. Yes, he's arriving. This is at Lancaster House, which is a very large house fairly near to Downing Street, greeting Sir Keir Starmer. Now, he gets a hug, not a kiss on each cheek, which is what Giorgia Meloni got. And quite a large gathering of European leaders, Canadian leader, Turkish leader. Macron enters the building with Sir Keir Starmer. Quite a responsibility for Sir Keir Starmer today. He's got to try and make some sense of divided positions, divided within Europe, and, of course, the tremendous division between Ukraine and the United States, which is the key new factor in all of this. So it looks like this summit, which is really a major meeting, is getting underway there at Lancaster House. Now, coming up, tomorrow marks the start of British Pie Week. I'll be sampling some Indian fusion pies next. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Be nice to escape the grey.
Clear skies, here we come.
As clear as our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast. Well, if you're heading towards Spain and the Canaries over the coming days, there will be some rain and potentially some strong winds around at times, but conditions will improve here as the week goes on. For parts of the central Med, generally a fine start to the week here, maybe a few showers around, and for eastern areas, certainly temperatures are beginning to climb after a cold few days. And further west, actually, sunshine by the middle part of the week for Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So the tale of two halves that we've seen over the past couple of days are expected to continue as we head over the next couple of days. High pressure very much in charge over the southern half of the UK, but weather fronts trying to move in from the northwest, generally fizzling out once they bump into that area of high pressure. But there is a focus for some more cloud, so a much cloudier start to the day for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland this morning. However, the southern half of England, much of Wales, a bright but chilly start to this morning with some frost in places. As we go through the rest of the afternoon, the cloud remains across much of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some outbreaks of patchy rain in places, but further south, plenty of sunshine and feeling pleasant where we do see that sunshine. Highs of 10, 11, perhaps 12 degrees in the south. As we then head into Sunday evening, we see this weather front arriving across the northwest, perhaps bringing some outbreaks of quite heavy rain across the Western Isles through Sunday evening, and generally remaining cloudy for much of the rest of Scotland, perhaps some outbreaks of patchy rain across northern England, southern Scotland this evening. A little drier, but still remaining quite cloudy across Northern Ireland. But for Wales and much of southern England, it will be a dry evening to come with plenty of clear spells to start the night. That weather front across the far northwest of Scotland continues to sink its way south and eastwards as we go through Sunday evening and into the start of Monday morning. Perhaps bringing some heavy rainfall for a time, but generally fizzling out as the further south it reaches. For the southern half of the UK, plenty of clear spells, and that likely to lead to some chilly temperatures overnight, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in some rural spots, and likely to see some mist and fog, particularly across the southeast of England into the early hours of Monday morning too. So a chilly but bright start for most across much of England and Wales. Further north, still a cloudier start. Outbreaks of rain gradually fizzling out across northern parts of England, and perhaps a bit of hazy sunshine across parts of Wales and central England. But otherwise, plenty of sunshine across the very far south again, and temperatures around about average for the time of year.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Tomorrow marks the start of British Pie Week, a celebration of the sweet and savoury staple that is at the heart of our cuisine. Indeed, apparently, we British eat £1 billion worth of pies every year. The British Pie Awards will get underway on Wednesday in Melton Mowbray, with competitors vying to be crowned champion for what is affectionately termed the Pie of Pies. Joining me now to talk about British Pie Week is the owner of Brobon Restaurant, Karim Ullah. Welcome back.
Hello, Michael.
Karim, you have very kindly made some pies and brought them in. Where should we start? Shall I start here?
Yeah, please do.
What the pie you're making here is a kind of fusion pie, is it? A fusion cuisine?
That is correct, yes. So we make spicy pies as opposed to the traditional British pies, steak and kidney. We do more spicier versions, so it's very, very tasty. If you want to have a try, you'll see what I mean.
Very good. What basic meats are you using here? Are they all meat-based or not?
Yeah, these are all meat-based. We do vegan one as well, but these are all meat-based. So we have one lamb, one chicken, and one beef. So we have a spicy minced beef one. We have a Bengal chicken curry. We have, I should have warned you, Michael.
That's popped out, hasn't it?
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
Now, what do you think that one is?
That is a chicken, Bengal chicken curry, yeah.
Well, it's absolutely glorious. Well done.
Thank you very much.
You managed to get it here warm as well.
Yes, just bake those here. So these, we've had the most amazing feedback. We actually did something last year for another British celebration, which is British Food Fortnight, and we thought, what could we do? So we did pies, and we had the most amazing feedback about those couple of weeks, and thought, well, British Pie Week, have to do something even more special this time.
I think I should say, first of all, that a pie is defined by having pastry all the way around.
Yes.
So, for example, those pies you sometimes get in pubs, where they claim to be pies, but actually they sit in a dish and they just have a crust. They don't qualify for this competition. I'm going to move the plate over this time.
No, please. I'm so sorry about that, Michael.
Not at all.
That is
lamb.
That is lamb. That is actually our signature dish. It's Ms. Special, MIS, which stands for Made in Stansted. It's a special lamb dish we cook in our restaurant, and we made it into a pie, and people love that too.
Just in case any viewers are confused, we're also showing, while talking about pies, we're showing the entrance to Lancaster House in London with the guardsmen in their very smart grey uniforms. But nothing much is happening there at the moment. I don't see anybody arriving. So let us proceed, you and I, to the third pie.
This, yeah, I'll go for that one. That one, it looks like the spicy. That will be the spiciest one you'll eat this.
Oh, marvellous.
Thank you. That is spicy beef with lots of different spices, and they all taste fantastic. Actually, I will tell you what, this is like eating an Indian curry with paratha.
Yes.
So the thin, flaky bread. So that's effectively what it is.
So you're saying that this fusion suits the pie very well. It's a very natural adaptation and development of the pie.
Yes, it is. And I believe if people get to know more about our pies, they will become very popular. And I can't see any reason why they can't be as popular as burgers.
Are any of these being entered for the Pie of Pie competition?
We didn't manage to enter this year, but next year we will have a go.
So let me just explain that at this St Mary's Church in Melton Mowbray, which is regarded apparently as the cathedral of pies, people from all over the country send their pies. I think about 1,000 pies are expected to be delivered, and then one of those pies is crowned the Pie of Pies. And I have a feeling that had you entered, you would have been very, very competitive this year.
That's very kind of you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Karim. And thank you to all of my guests this week. I very much hope that this first programme of March has put some spring into your step. I'll be back next week at the same time. Coming up now on GB News is The Weekend with Dawn Neeson. So from me, it's going to be goodbye, but stick with GB News. Thank you very much. Now I must...
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. High pressure stays in charge of our weather across the southern half of the UK over the next couple of days, but low pressure never too far away further north, with weather fronts trying to sneak their way south and eastwards as we go over the next couple of but generally starting to weaken as they bump into that area of high pressure. That does mean there's going to be quite a lot of cloud around across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, into northern parts of England, with this weather front pushing its way south and eastward, so perhaps some quite heavy rainfall across western parts of Scotland into the early hours of Monday morning. But further south, a bit of a different picture, plenty of clear spells on offer, so turning quite chilly under those clear skies too, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in some spots. However, staying generally frost-free across the northern half of the UK. As we go into the start of Monday morning, under those clear spells, particularly across the southern half of the UK, and in particular across the southeast, there could be some mist and fog in places, so that perhaps causing some travel disruption during Monday morning's rush hour. However, a different picture further north. Plenty of cloud around, some outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, in southern parts of Scotland, particularly over any high ground too. Blustery showers then feeding in from the west across parts of Shetland and Orkney, and still remaining really quite cloudy to start the day on Monday for much of Scotland. As we then go through the rest of Monday morning, any of that mist and fog, perhaps a little slow to clear in places, but will eventually burn off as the sun comes up, leaving plenty of sunshine for the southern half of the UK as we go through Monday afternoon. Further north, still remaining rather quite cloudy across northern parts of England over any high ground. Temperatures generally around about where they were on Sunday, highs of 10, 11, perhaps 12 degrees, so really feeling quite pleasant where we see that sunshine in the south. As we then go through